Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Blood of the Dead. I don't know why I wanted to say For the Dead, but I had to make sure. Anywho, today is Tuesday? Yeah, it is. I went to go see Batman: The Killing Joke last night. If you guys would be interested, I kind of want to sort of do a review on it. Not so much review, though, but I would like to discuss the film, preferably at length. I'll see if Miga would be free. Anyway, we left off on page 12. Let's see. Des, or Dez, I guess it depends on how you prefer. Nottingham. Zombie Wrangler. Sorry. I don't know where that came from. Anyway. Ha! And they said I couldn't stand up for myself, Des shouted, thinking back to the kids of 4 years ago who stuffed him in a locker at school. Now I'm king and all you bozos are gonna pay. He hid just inside the mouth of an alley and peered out onto the dark street. It was littered with dismantled cars, each stripped for anything that might be useful or of value. The surrounding buildings were all dark. It was night, just the way he liked it. Iggy, not now. He really does not like our cats. Let's see, where was I? It was night, just the way he liked it. Just him and the undead. Several blocks down the street, 4 members of the dead ambled down the sidewalk, their bodies swaying awkwardly side to side as they planted decrepit feet down one in front of the other. It was because of them, and those like them, that the world was in the state it was in. Des Nottingham waited, careful to remain out of sight. When the time was right, he would pounce and take the suckers down. Just like at school, sneak up on old Des and snuff him out. Now it's my turn to have my way, I assume he said to himself. He admired his well-muscled arms, as rippled as sandbars. His body was a far cry from what it used to be, and from what people remembered. For a moment he thought he should have had a gun, then thought better of it, remembering that, for him, he just simply preferred to smash heads. Most folks just settled for popping a bullet between the creature's eyes, and left it at that. Des preferred to plow their skulls into the pavement whenever he could, cracking the bone and smearing sweet goo and brain matter all across the concrete. Ah, it's morbid. Hi, kitten. Can't live without your brains, can you? He said. The dead men drew nearer. Each had been middle-aged when they died. Now they were mere shells of their former selves, all pasty gray skin and bulging eyes. Biggie. Leaning up against the wall inside the alley, Des went over the game plan in his mind. This was his favorite part. The few seconds before the kill. If killing something that was already dead counted as killing, that is. He peered around the corner. The zombies stopped, as if sensing his presence. Uh-oh. Des breathed. Don't say uh-oh, you idiot. You knew you were going to face them. What's the difference if they saw you first? He smirked. Life or death, that's the difference. Just don't let them bite you, and you won't come back as one of them. The creatures drew nearer, arranging themselves in single file, like sand people. I realized how that must have sounded, but I was referring to the characters from Star Wars. Where was I? Each hugging the wall of the building beside them. Sure, make it easier for me. Figures. No challenges left in life, it seems. Bummer. He waited a moment longer, and the second the shadow of one of the undead materialized at the mouth of the alley, Des jumped out. Black Sabbath's Iron Man playing in his head. He wrapped his fingers around the zombie's neck. Using the momentum from the jump, he swung on the zombie's neck to the side, yanking the creature down and taking it to the pavement. He landed on top of it then, quickly, got to his feet. and sent the heel of his heavy, steel-toed boot into the back of the zombie's skull, cracking it like an egg. He brought his knee up and mashed his foot down again, further splitting the bone. A splash of black blood and mushy brain burst from its housing and splattered onto the pavement. Des leaped back into the air and landed on the zombie's head with both feet, squashing it like a melon. That's a lot of work for just the one zombie. The other three creatures came toward him, two of them with their arms raised, trying to grab him. He took the closest one's wrists in his hands, spun on his heels so his back was facing it, and then brought the creature's elbow down on his shoulder, breaking it against the joint. A sharp shard of bone popped through the remains of the creature's dust-covered navy blue suit jacket. The break didn't faze the dead man, not that Des expected it to, but at least this way the creature was with one less useful appendage. Sorry about that. Des kicked the creature in the gut, the force of the blow making it double over. He then grabbed the zombie by the ears, jumped up, and sent a knee into the dead man's nose. The creature fell off to the side just as the other two came at him and worked together, each taking one of Des's arms. "This the best you got?" Des said, and chuckled. He ran for the wall in front of him, dragging the zombies with him. He kicked out his right leg and ran up the wall, flipped over, and freed himself from their grasp. He landed behind them. I would love to be able to do this. The creature with the broken arm moved for him. Des ran around it, jumped on its back, and slammed his elbow down on the top of the dead man's skull. The blow was enough to daze the creature. Des dismounted, grabbed the creature by the scruff of the neck, and ran into the building wall, smashing its face against the brick in a dark smear of blood and scraped skin. He jerked the creature's head back, then launched it forward again, breaking the creature's face and skull against the building like a water balloon. That sounds disgusting. The corpse fell and hit the sidewalk and moved no more. There were still the other two to take down, and they were on him fast. He usually wasn't this slow. "Don't get distracted," he told himself. "You punks ready for some more?" he said, as they grabbed him, one with its arms around his chest, the other scooping him by the legs. They hoisted him off the ground and then tossed him several feet in the air, sending him flying into the frame of an Oldsmobile. I almost said something else. That had smashed into a streetlight long ago. Des lay there against the mobile. Mobile? Mobile? I don't know. Where was I? Unable to move. Come on, get up. He still lay there. Let's go already. Slowly, he managed to right himself, then planted his feet on the ground. Okay, how about a little... And he raised his arms, palms up, curling his index fingers toward himself a few times. Why do people do that? Huh? Or, I guess it'd be more like, huh? Or, huh? I don't know. Let's see, the zombies moved toward him. Yeah, that's what I thought. Des took off his boot, drew out the lace so there was some slack, and then spun it around, like nunchaku. Oh dear. That'd actually be kind of fun. I'd be terrible at it, though. I speak from experience. Where was I? The buzz of the boot spinning through the air sent a wave of excitement through him. He let the nearest creature have it, whacking the steel tip of the boot into the side of its head. It stumbled off to the side. The other came closer. Des let him have one too. You really think you're going to take me, don't you? He socked each of the creatures once more with the boot. Dazed, the creatures stopped moving for a second before redoubling their efforts. One grabbed him, holding him tight, while the other moved in for the kill. Des whipped up his left boot and nailed the zombie between the legs just as it was about to bite. The blow didn't faze it, like kicking a heavy pillow. As the creature's mouth opened near Jess's neck, he realized he'd be done for if he didn't act immediately. I would imagine so. With a violent jerk, he swung his head into the zombie's skull, smacking, into the, yeah, what? Swung his head into the zombie's, okay. Skull smacking against skull, there we go. I didn't see the comma at first. The zombie teetered to the side, giving Des more room to maneuver. He stomped on the foot of the one that held him, elbowed it in the stomach, then yanked his arms free. Though he knew mashing down on his toe, on its toe, and hitting it in the gut didn't do anything, it still felt good to do it. Des grabbed his boot off the pavement and threw it at them, not caring which one he hit. The boot smacked the zombie he'd headbutted. Des pounced on its back and tackled it to the ground. He landed on top of it, straddled its back, and then picked up its head by the back of the hair and plowed its face into the pavement over and over, breaking its head open. Wet brain and black blood splashed all over him, but he didn't care. Lost in the moment, he had forgotten about the last zombie until it grabbed his shoulders from behind, dragged him off its kin, and went to sink its teeth into his face. Des punched it in the head square on, then came in from the side and hook punched its jaw, dislocating it. Again, this is something I wish I could actually be able to do, which is weird because I'm very non-violent. I guess the ability to do something doesn't necessarily mean that I would actually do something. I don't know. Like, it would be nice to do, or to be able to do parkour, but considering where I live, I don't think that would ever be useful. Anyway, where was I? Where was I? That'll teach you not to French me, you slimy goober. Sheesh. Sorry. That's something I used to say all the time. Goober? What a loser. This guy almost sounds like me in his head. He wrestled out from underneath it, scrambled on all fours until he was behind it, stood, then grabbed the zombie by the shins and yanked the creature's legs out from under it. The corpse hit the pavement with a sickening smack. Quickly, Des made for the body of the zombie with the broken arm, tore the broken arm off at the elbow, and then returned to the last of the creatures and beat it with the arm, using it as a club to the creature's skull. He whacked it over and over until the zombie stirred no more. He threw the arm to the side, stood, and dusted himself off. Black Sabbath still rang in his ears. I've never listened to any of their songs. Most bands of that era, I actually have never really heard. To give you a vague idea of me, I guess, I didn't listen to my first Korn song until about 2 years ago. I think I might have mentioned it on the channel before. I am Des Nottingham, Zombie Wrangler, he shouted, fists clenched and arms raised above his head in victory. Just then, everything went black, and Des was sucked off the street and back into the living room of his tiny bachelor apartment, reclining on the lazy boy. That was twice this week the power went out while he was in the middle of a game. Oh, okay. See, that sounds more like me. Alrighty. Chapter. Page 16. August Norton. Recluse Christian dude. This sounds like me too. This wasn't the way the world was supposed to end. No matter which way August Norton approached it, nothing that had happened was supposed to have happened. The dead were not supposed to rise. Ever. Well, that's not really true. I appreciate the sentiment, but I would prefer if people actually would do a little bit more research. I say that, but, you know, nobody's perfect. And, yeah, anyway, where was I? The only biblical prophecy that stated the dead would appear was Revelation... Again, I appreciate, you know, the sentiment, but no. Where was I? Oh well. It bothers me. Where did I leave off? Oh well, I'm sure you know the passage anyway. Which spoke of the sea and death and Hades giving up the dead that was in them to face the white throne judgment at the feet of Christ. Then and only then would the dead rise, and even when that event occurred, the dead wouldn't be on the earth, because the earth and sky would flee from the presence of Christ. Okay. I don't want to get into it. I'm born-again Christian, raised Catholic. I still follow a lot of the Catholic teachings. Enough of that was true to make people think that the rest of it was true. Although I suppose if you wanted to interpret it that way, it technically would be possible. But no. Anyway. But these weren't the dead, he reminded himself. They were the undead. And they were on Earth, and planet Earth was still here. Since the dead began to rise and transform any people unfortunate enough to be in their path, August had locked himself and his family away at his cabin an hour's drive out of town. At first for safety, then for answers. Over the past year, he had read the Bible 3 times. That's not a lot. Read every Bible commentary he had in his library, 4 all told. Pored over the ancient end-of-days prophecies countless times, sought the Lord earnestly in prayer, and was met with a dead end at every turn. For well over 200 days, he promised his wife, 2 sons, their wives, and his 5 grandchildren that the Lord Christ was in control, and that what happened the world over wasn't beyond God's remedy. Even when his family's faith began to falter, he remained strong. Each morning they met in prayer. Each night they met again, day in and day out. Until the last day, the one that made him question God for the first time since being saved as a young man back in '62. He had thought despite all the pain the dead had caused, despite being forced from his home, God would come to the rescue. It had been a hard life even before he became a Christian, growing up with little to eat, not many friends in school, fighting in Nam, watching his friends being shot or blown to pieces from behind that helicopter window. Even now, he still dreamed about them once in a while. He thought that after settling down and having a family, everything would be fine, peaceful. But life was seldom peaceful, and especially not now with the dead roaming around. His son Jonathan had gone outside for a midnight cigarette. He'd never come back in. Jonathan's wife, Lydia, after lying in bed alone for over an hour, had gone out to look for him. She too never returned. In the morning, August's other son, David, had gone looking for his brother. He couldn't go far. The rule was not to exceed the invisible 100-yard self-imposed boundary the Norton family had put around the property. Not long after he had gone out, David's wife, Jan, had wanted to join her husband. August permitted it, much to his later regret, and Jan, like the 3 before her, never returned. That night, sitting around the kitchen table, August, his wife Eleanor, and the 5 children ate dinner in silence. August's mind half in prayer, the other going over scenario after scenario as to what might have happened to Jonathan, Lydia, David, and Jan. Every scenario kept drawing the same conclusion. They had been taken, and, most likely, transformed into the hell-birth creatures that roamed the earth. Eleanor looked up at him from her canned beans with blue, earnest eyes. She didn't need to say anything. The question was, what now? They were both too old to manage safety and the children on their own. August was 67. She was 64. The kids, John Jr., Bella, Finch, Katie, and Stuart, were 9, 7, 7, 5, and 4, respectively. John, Bella, and Finch, though kids, were old enough to handle themselves well enough, but Katie and Stuart needed a mom and dad. August just shook his head. I don't know, and poked at his own beans with his fork. They finished dinner, and during the cleanup, August peered through the window above the sink and saw 4 shadows off in the field across the way. They moved slowly toward the cabin. You better get over here," he said as calmly as he could, despite the urgent tone that forced itself through. Eleanor finished drying her old hands, set down the dish towel, and joined him. "What is it?" Let go. "Straight across. There." She pulled up her bifocals. "I would love to have some of those." From the chain around her neck, set them on her nose, and leaned closer to the window so she could see. "Oh no," she whispered. "Get the kids." She nodded and left his side. As she proceeded to the living room, she said, "Kids, why don't we go play a game in the bedroom?" John Jr. held up the Superman action figure he had been flying around. Oh dear. I used to have a Superman toy when I was little. Kind of weird to think about. There was a time where I liked Superman more than I liked Batman. I like to refer to those as the lost years. Admittedly, I love Superman. He's great. Just Batman. Anyway, where was I? It's okay. Me and Soups are going to save Bella and Katie from the evil Finch and his stupid sidekick, Stu Boy. Not stupid, Stuart shouted at him. "I was only kidding, doofus." "Watch your mouth, JJ, Eleanor said. "Stuart is not stupid, and you don't call people—" "I forget what you said. Now bring Superman, and we'll go to the next room. I want to show you kids something." "A surprise?" Katie asked. "Come and see." The little girl was on her feet in a jiff and joined her grandma's side. After a moment, the others, with a huff, stood and followed Eleanor and Katie into the bedroom. "Now this is what I wanted to show you," Eleanor said as she closed the bedroom door. Uh-oh. Keeping one ear on their muffled voices, the other listening attentively for activity out front, August went to the closet near the door and pulled down his .22. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all that he had and all he ever wanted to have. Oh Lord, is it murder if they're already dead? He tugged down the box of bullets from between the stack of gloves and old hats lining the top shelf. He brought the rifle and bullets to the kitchen table, checked the ammo. Only about 20 shots, and the bullets were faded and worn. He couldn't think of how long they'd been sitting up there. Probably since sometime in the 80s. Bullets expire, don't they? Let me know. Anyway, where was I? After loading the rifle, he snuck back over to the window and looked outside. The 4 shadows were closer now, and, sure enough, they belonged to Jonathan, Lydia, David, and Jan. Whilst whistling the first line of "How Great Thou Art" as loud as he could, he waited for Eleanor to whistle back the next line. She did. It was an agreed-upon signal between the adults that something was wrong, and the person beginning the tune had to leave the cabin. The response of the second line was an affirmation that the departure would be okay. August smiled to himself, proud of his wife. He knew her heart was breaking inside, but at the same time each were strong enough in their faith to know that, should something happen, it wasn't goodbye forever. It was, see ya when we meet again. He checked the window. Jonathan and Lydia were on the front lawn, ambling toward the door. David and Jan were no longer with them. "Be with me, Lord," he whispered. He slipped on his old brown boots. Rifle at the ready, he took a deep breath and unlocked the door. Once outside, on the front steps, a chill swept through him. He should have put on a jacket over his brown and red checkered shirt. Jonathan and Lydia were not too far away, maybe 20 feet, maybe less. August locked the door, pounded on it twice, letting Eleanor within know that he was still all right. She tapped twice on the glass of the bedroom window at the front of the property in reply. It was also another code, one that said, "I love you." That's really nice, I like that. He glanced toward the window. Eleanor had already closed the curtain. August faced his son and daughter-in-law. Even in the dark, he could see the color was bleached from their faces, their eyes white, their expression cold and heartless, and not just from being dead. A portion of Jonathan's neck was missing, and a mess of red and black tissue. And was a mess of red and black tissue. Lydia only had her brown hair on one side of her head, the other side ripped away along with her ear. The damage to her head hadn't been enough to kill her, though, only change her. August shuddered at the thought of what might have happened, but that didn't matter now. His family was inside, and he had to protect them. He stepped down the 3 front steps and set his feet firmly on the grass. Jonathan and Lydia stepped toward them, their footfalls feeble, yet strangely sure at the same time. He knew that if they could, they'd run at him and take him down. Not tonight. August raised the rifle. "Jonathan," he called, "you know I love you, so I'm going to ask you once, if you can hear me somehow." Tears pooled at the bottom of his eyes, and his voice cracked when he spoke next. "Turn around and walk away." Jonathan's expression did not change, nor did he give any sign that he understood his father. "I love you, son," August said, and lined up his shot. Bang! The shot hit him in the heart. Jonathan stopped, and then, as if nothing happened, kept advancing. Shocked it didn't faze his son, August felt the corners of his eyes pinch with tears as he aligned his next shot. Bang! A hole appeared in the center of Jonathan's forehead, and he dropped to the ground. Tears leaked out of August's eyes, and through blurry vision he watched as Lydia kept moving toward him, her arms raised, about to grab him. "Good night, darling," he said, and sent a bullet through her eye and into her brain. She hit the ground as well. Muffled banging came from the rear of the property. The back door, August thought, eyes wide. He propelled his old legs as quickly as possible around the cabin with the hope of catching David and Jan still outside. The muffled thudding continued all the while he rounded the cabin, and just as he arrived at the rear, a loud crackle signaled that the door had been broken. He got there just in time to see Jan squeezing her way through the 3-foot hole in the door. David was already inside. August got the rifle ready and got as close to her as he could, with her body half fallen over the hole in the door, her rubbery legs kicking at the grass as she tried to crawl her way in. Sending a bullet into the back of her head was easy. "David!" August shouted, as if David could hear him, and even if his oldest son did, he wouldn't listen to him. The back door had been locked ever since the Nortons arrived at the cabin about 9 months ago, so August reached in through the hole and fumbled around until he found the deadbolt. He tried opening the door. It opened a few inches, then hit something. He tugged again. It wouldn't budge. He glanced down. Jan's weight on the door was enough to put the pressure on the wood, causing the bottom corner to scrape along the floorboards and catch against one of them that had warped a long time ago. August had forgotten about that board and cursed himself now for having put off fixing it. Grunting, he yanked on the door over and over. Thump, 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 banging from within. The children screamed. "Ee!" August shouted, "Kids!" "August!" Eleanor shrieked. The kids squealed. Tiny footfalls echoed through the cabin. For a moment, August expected a pair of them or more to find him. Instead, the screams were cut off one by one, until silence reigned. Shaking, tears running from his eyes, August turned and ran down the back steps and was about to go to the van out front and hightail it back to the city when he stopped himself. "I can't," he whispered. They're going to..." He checked to see how many bullets he had left. 7. He wished he had taken more. The rest were still on the table inside. Sobbing, he walked to the front, expecting David and the others to appear and charge him. For a moment, he entertained the idea of letting them. Why not? The world was going to end anyway. But if they do, I have no idea if I will be truly dead or not. Will I still be alive or aware in some way? I refuse to let myself, or even my spirit, go over to them, he prayed, asking God to preserve the spirits of his family, but somehow his family was indeed dead, and the creatures were nothing but demonically possessed human shells. I wonder if there's a zombie novel like that. I imagine there is. I think I know of one. If you happen to know of one, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to read it. David was the first to appear at the front door. He pushed it open, took the first step, fine, then stumbled down the rest. As he straightened, the others appeared. The kids first, then Eleanor. Each had a similarly hard time coming down the steps. I'm kind of surprised I was able to get that word out. Anyway. August jogged a good distance away, turned, and aimed. I love my sons the same. David, you know I love you, so I'm only going to ask this once. Turn around and walk away. David, his body rocking side to side, a piece of his hip missing, kept coming toward him. I love you, son, August said. Deja vu flooding him. He pulled the trigger and knocked out the middle of David's face. His son's body dropped. The kids stepped side by side, each with a hole in their necks, syrupy blood still oozing out. Oh heavens, I'm so sorry. He shot each of the little ones down. Eleanor moved toward him, her beautiful face untouched, her white eyes looked through him, and even though he knew she was dead, he thought she could understand him somehow, understand what he was about to do. He didn't know where David had bit her, and if not for those white eyes, he could believe she hadn't been bitten at all, and this was all some kind of act she was putting on to fool the undead around her. Eleanor raised the fingers of her left hand. 2 of them were missing. My darling, he said, forgive me. He wiped his running nose with a thumb and forefinger, then caressed the trigger. He squeezed, but the slickness from the snot was enough to make his finger slide off and tug the barrel down. The bullet pierced his wife's neck, and a stream of dark blood squirted out in a fast arc. No! He gasped. Sorry. He was out of bullets. Hand to his face, his heart raced, not knowing what to do. The strength drained from his legs, the adrenaline coursing through him too much for his old body to bear. Eleanor neared and had both hands held out toward him. She grabbed hold of his neck and pushed, landing on top of him. He had never known her to be so strong. The notion of demonic possession flashed across his mind again. He wanted to speak, to ask the name of the spirit that had her, but the pressure around his neck was too much, and he couldn't get a sound out. God, help me. Jesus, help me. Over and over he pleaded for the Most High to intervene. Over and over he was met with silence. He pushed against her arms. They wouldn't budge. Her face drew near to his, mouth open, teeth at the ready. He took the rifle by the butt. I'm stupid. Anyway. Stretched out his arm so the tip of the barrel was pointed to the side of Eleanor's head, and plunged it into her temple. She stopped her charge, her dead weight settling on him. He let the blood oozing from the wound wash over them both, and laid with her for several minutes, catching his breath and absorbing what he'd just done, seemingly without thinking. Now, 3 months later, August wondered if God had abandoned him that night. Maybe God had abandoned the world. Sucking back a shot of tequila, which is a friend of mine's favorite drink apparently, August reclined in the chair in the living room and stared at his bare feet. The nails were long and curling, same with those on his hands. He hadn't shaved nor cut his hair since the night his family died. He glanced to the floor and in his mind's eye looked through it to the crawl space beneath to where he had buried his family. I'll be with you soon. The food was almost gone. They had gotten a 6-month supply originally, but had made it stretch. It stretched even more once there was only one mouth to feed. Let's see. I can probably make it a couple of weeks without food. If I want to go sooner, I just won't drink anything for a few days. Either that or... He looked to the rifle leaning up against the door. There was one bullet in the chamber. It was for him. Okay, my throat kind of hurts. I'm going to need a lot of water. It's kind of dry in here. Oh, and sorry that there's a late upload today. I woke up and did some more cleaning. What was I going to say? Excuse me. I'm kind of hungry, but I think I'll put off eating until I read the next book. Oh, before I forget, I have a new book. Amiga and I had hung out for a little bit yesterday, and we were at Barnes & Noble. And I got the first book of the Dresden Files. If you guys would be interested in me reading that for the channel, let me know. I'm probably going to read it on my own anyway, but it should be fun, and I think it would be quite beneficial for mine and Miga's series. Not like copy everything he does, but like give us an idea of how to build the world that we're working on. Anyway, until next time, goodbye everybody. I feel like I'm forgetting something important.